folks, this is all the fruit, and today I'm visiting something which is supposed to be one of the best botanic gardens in all of the Côte d'Azur and in all of France. It's the Jardins de la Mediterranee, or the Mediterranean gardens. Well, garden, check. Mediterranean, check. That far, everything seems to be correct, but it's a lot more than that. Mediterranean is not just a place on the globe, it's also a specific climate with a specific vegetation. And this place is a botanic garden which basically shows you vegetation from a lot of Mediterranean climate regions around the world, and also from other subtropical regions from where the plants can be grown here. Basically we have, how many was it? 5 Mediterranean areas in the world. That's California and surrounding areas, central Chile, South Africa, West Australia, and, well, last but definitely not least, the Mediterranean. Mediterranean is a sort of a kind of an oceanic subtropical to warm temperate climate. It occurs on the west side of continents. You will notice that all of that, like West Australia, California, Chile, also more or less the western part of South Africa and the Mediterranean, all on the western side of big land masses. So, yeah, it's kind of a western oceanic climate. It's defined by hot, dry summers and mild, rainy winters. And most of the areas with the Mediterranean climate in the world, they are kind of smallish, like the area in western South Africa is quite small, central Chile is quite small, the Mediterranean area in California is quite small, same thing in West Australia, because the coastlines there are more or less straight. If you look at the map, in California you have Baja, but the area of Baja is mostly desert. Then Chile, basically more or less a straight line. South Africa, more or less straight, and same more or less with West Australia. But here in the Mediterranean there is this giant inland sea which stretches many thousands of miles into the center of the giant land mass, which is basically Eurasia and Africa. Basically it stretches into the center of this land mass, which encompasses much more than half of all the world's land mass. Without this gigantic inland sea, which feeds hundreds of millions of people, not just with its fish, but also with its Mediterranean climate, which is good for agriculture, without this, we would have a gigantic desert in the center of this landmass. Imagine a desert stretching all the way from the Atlantic Ocean to China. Now we have tens of millions of square kilometers of desert in this area, but imagine basically most of the classical civilizations of the world wouldn't have existed without this giant inland sea. And it has quite a specific vegetation. Mediterranean climate is dominated by evergreen stuff, with basically evergreen trees and shrubs with smallish hard leaves. There are a lot of other vegetation zones which are dominated by similar vegetation, and a lot of those plants from other biogeographical zones got adapted to the Mediterranean climate. However, there are a couple quite strange cases, like with the strawberry trees and a couple other species, but closely related species grow in different Mediterranean climate areas in the world. Let's see what interesting Mediterranean stuff we can find in this beautiful and gigantic botanic garden. It's like 20 hectares, so like, what is it, 40 acres. This here looks a lot like the Canary Island strawberry tree. In my opinion, this is the tastiest strawberry tree of them all. But it could also be the Californian one with this red bark. Here is a fruit fallen to the ground, not completely ripe. Not ripe at all, actually. So not sure if it's the Canary Island or the Californian one. The Canary Island one, in my opinion, is the tastiest strawberry tree of them all. Antulis barbaiovis, a very typical Mediterranean little tree from the Fabaceae family, and it's so frost tender that it basically only grows in direct view of the sea. It rarely grows more than 1 or 2 kilometers inland. Even in southern Italy, in Gargano, I found it only on slopes overlooking the sea. It really needs very mild climate. Basically, you say Mediterranean climate temperatures rarely fall beneath -7 degrees centigrade. You can calculate what this is in freedom units. And basically never under -17. Here we have the most iconic tree of the Canary Islands, the dragon tree. Still a very young specimen, but quite impressive. Behind it, a very important cactus for dry subtropical climates. It's not really a desert cactus, it's the most common feral cactus in the Mediterranean, the Barbary fig or prickly pear, covered with lots of tasty prickly fruits of enormous size. This doesn't really do well in real deserts. It does much better in the Mediterranean climate. Those flat stems, yeah, most people think they are leaves, but they're actually stems. They suck up water all winter, and that water is enough to bring them through the hot summer. But it's not enough to bring them through several years of drought like it's typical in most deserts. For that you rather have those thick columnar cacti. This stuff is enough water reserves for a couple months, but not enough water reserves for a couple years. Here we have a Mediterranean strawberry tree, and it's Arbutus andrachne, the one that grows on acidic rocks. And if you look at the rocks here, yes, they're acidic. That's not limestone, very acidic rock. Also, I knew this because there will be cork oak somewhere. So Arbutus andrachne on acidic rocks. On limestone rocks, it would have been Arbutus unedo. Sarsaparilla, this incredibly spiny vine here is Sarsaparilla. However, well, this specimen is not too spiny, but some are horribly spiny. Bunches of little grape-like fruits. The fruits are not edible, but the leaves are the favorite food of the Smurfs, you know, those tiny blue dwarfs. And also, the plant is being used to make some sort of drinks. Here we have rosemary. It's another native plant, very typical for the Mediterranean, very aromatic. It's also very typical for Mediterranean climate to have a lot of aromatic trees, a lot of aromatic shrubs mostly, not so many trees except for maybe the bay leaf. Here we have a Canary Island dragon tree fruiting. The fruits are edible, but on most trees they taste really disgusting, not just bad but horrible. But if you're lucky and find the good one, on some trees they taste really good. Here's some more Canary Island strawberry trees with still very young fruits. Also lots of pines around here. They are planted. Most of the pines that are planted in the Mediterranean are actually different Mediterranean species, but they are not typical for those slopes. Pines mostly grow on Mediterranean sand dunes. They were planted on those slopes for timber in the 20th century. So those pine-covered slopes everywhere around Mediterranean Canaries. Well, most of the stuff is not really Canaries around here. Most of the stuff is typical Mediterranean. Well, those pine-covered slopes and coastlines, they are not natural. However, the big pinetas behind big beaches in the sand dune area, well, most of them are planted, but at least on natural pine tree habitat. Hieropancha vulgaris, another edible prickly pear. Basically all the prickly pears are edible, but a lot of them are not worth the trouble. This one is worth the trouble. It's kind of tasty. You can even find it in supermarkets, for example in Spain. And here, Ruscus aculeatus. In German it's called mouse thorn. I don't know what it's called in English. Definitely not edible, but very ornamental. What is totally edible is the wild asparagus. Everybody in Italy forages this. It looks like even here on the French Mediterranean coast it's been foraged. It's 100 times tastier than every cultivated asparagus. But since millions of people forage it every year, it can be hard to get enough in more popular areas. Mastix, this is a pistachio species native to the Mediterranean area. Yeah, if it reminds you of the word masticate, yeah, this has been the standard chewing gum in the old world for thousands of years. Millions and millions of people have masticated the white sap of this plant. Here it is, but it's still too liquid, needs to solidify more. Millions of people have masticated this tasty sap. Of course, with the modern sweetened and flavorized chewing gums, this stuff is all but forgotten nowadays. Another prickly pear. Prickly pears are not easy to identify. For me, this looks almost like a hybrid of Ficus indica and Robusta. It could also be one of the countless other species. I'm sure the fruits are edible and tasty. Just don't want to eat them here right in front of the ticket office of the Botanic Garden. One problem with all those pine trees is they are making, one problem is they're making the soil sour. Another problem is they are taking away habitat from other species. Another problem is they burn even easier than the natural vegetation. The biggest problem is they suck up too much water. A lot of the water problems of the Mediterranean have something to do with all those pines planted, billions of pines planted on Mediterranean slopes. However, there is one pine which does not use up water, but it produces water. This is the Canary Island pine. The Canary Islands are a subtropical climate which is similar to the Mediterranean and shares a lot of species with the Mediterranean. But a specialty of the Canary Islands is that they don't have so much rain, but they have a lot of fog. And the Canary Island pine, those long leaves, comb the fog out of the clouds. They collect the fog from the clouds and drop it on the ground. So if it rains and you hide under a Canary Island pine, it will rain twice as much on you, because not only will the raindrops come down, but also the fog will come down as drops from all those needles. So Canary Island pine, they planted a lot of exotic pines in the Canary Island in the 20th century. But then they realized that the Canary Island pine is the only one that will give them water. Now they are restoring those forests in the Canary Islands. They are also trying to transplant it to other parts of the world, but it doesn't work very well everywhere. I guess it will work well in the fog deserts of Chile, but here in the Mediterranean might increase the rainfall a little bit in winter, but I'm afraid it will suck up too much water in summer. Almost everybody says this is a giant and beautiful botanic garden, but the reviews, they all complain about the lack of labels. Did I already say that there is an audio guided tours? I'm an old man, I'm forgetting things. Those little palms here, they might look very exotic, but they're actually native to the Côte d'Azur. The Côte d'Azur is the northernmost area where palms are native anywhere in the world. And the native palms are not tall single stem trees, but those little shrubs. Because palms are mostly a tropical family with just very few species extending into subtropical and warm temperate areas. So here we are supposed to be in California. Yeah, looks pretty Californian. I think those should be Joshua trees here, very young Joshua trees. Oh yeah, some prickly cholla, here some slightly older Joshua trees. Cacti are very dangerous. Not only are there like legends that they will give you water, no, if you know how to treat a cactus it might give you food, but never water. The liquid inside the cactus, it might feed you on some occasions, but it will never water you, it will dehydrate you. And if you fall into a bunch of cacti, not only in a survival, but even in a normal hiking situation, your chances of dying increase exponentially. The Mediterranean is an area very rich in flowers, especially in spring. Here the cistus, each one of those small shrubs was covered with about 100 giant white flowers. This is one of the white sister species. However, now, towards the end of July, it's not as dry as it could be because there was a lot of rain in June apparently, but it's still mostly a really dried up, scorched, not wasteland, but a very biodiverse area. However, don't expect too many flowers or even too much greenery. Oh my, this mastic strop, which was too liquid, stuck my lips together. It hurts a lot. Now we are in Australia. You notice everything still looks pretty much the same. If you don't know the exact names of the plants, well, of course they left a lot of the older plants around here, like the strawberry trees and the pines. And yeah, eucalyptus is introduced pretty much everywhere in the Mediterranean. But yeah, before we were in the Canary Island area, then in the California area, now in the Australia area. And the differences are really subtle. Because it's all Mediterranean climates, it's often very similar plants. And even if they are not closely related, they kind of develop in the same way as a type of convergent evolution. Says it's small, hard, evergreen leaves. That's pretty typical. Yeah, okay, they planted a lot of eucalyptus, but for example, the mastix is not Australian, but they left it. In the background, the kurajong, an ornamental tree with very beautiful flowers and edible fruits, which will try to kill you when you process and eat them, but that's normal. In Australia, everything is trying to kill you. People usually just talk about all the critters like the crocodiles and the monitor lizards and the snakes and the spiders. But believe me, folks, the Australian plants, they are just as dangerous. You can be killed just as well by a plant or by your dinner in Australia as by a crocodile. And unlike the crocodiles, the plants don't just stay near the water, they can kill you anywhere. I cannot really tell you a lot about the different species. Those are some ericaceae. This is an eucalyptus. This is some acacia. Since they don't have a single label for any plants, they just have labels Australia, South Africa, and so on. Yeah, that's why I cannot tell you a lot about those plants. Those beautiful things down there with the erect inflorescences. Really beautiful. I just have no idea what they are. Some monocots. Oh, and here is a kurajong tree. Beautiful flowers, grows very well in urban climate. That's why it's being planted everywhere in subtropical areas as a street tree. You can dig out the roots and eat them. You can get water from the roots, which is the most important thing in Australian deserts and other hot, dry Australian areas. I think you can chew the sap, but I don't see sap on this one. I think you can even eat the flowers. Food-wise, the fruits are very important. There are seeds inside which you can eat, and those seeds are surrounded by a lot of itchy hairs which will make your clothes unusable. You have to throw them away. Your skin will itch for days or weeks, and if you get them into your eyes, you can easily die from them. As I said, in Australia, everything is trying to kill you, including, talking of spiders, this huge bumblebee got caught in the spider's net, and yeah, the spider is just eating it while it's struggling. That's Australia for you folks. It might be Australia in the French Mediterranean, but the spiders, they never disappoint. I'm really a bit disappointed about the lack of labels. I'm not such a good botanist to know all those plants from all around the world by heart. Okay, if it was a Mediterranean garden, it would have been okay, but all those Australian and South African trees, I have kind of an idea what they are. I can mostly ID the family, but the species, that's not easy for me. This must have been some nice old manor, well, it's, yeah, domain, yeah, some old house with a park belonging to some really posh, rich people. Strelitzia nicolai. It looks like a banana. I think it's called the, what was it, the something banana, named after some African country. And actually, you can eat the fruits, or more exactly the arils which are attached to the seeds, but here cannot find any pollinated seeds, so probably you cannot eat anything about this plant. Different aloes. I was told once that all aloes are good for your skin. This should be what, aloe arborea here. Really beautiful, especially when it's flowering. It's good for your skin. But the aloe ferox back then, if you, here is another one closer. If you smear this stuff on your skin, you will suffer. It's gonna burn your skin like fire. Large num num in the background. This is a really tasty fruit which is a popular ornamental in Mediterranean climates, but right now they are all flowering and not fruiting. Another large num num num. And here I see the beautiful flowers. I see a unripe green fruit. They see a half ripe one. When they are ripe they are dark red. I will leave them alone. They have milky sap. One of the few fruits with milky sap which are edible, but I don't want to eat them unripe. Here in Erythrina, don't even know what this is. This should be, not sure what this is. Here, they use the cork of the cork oak, yeah, the bark. The oak wood actually, it degrades much faster than the bark from which you make corks, so they use it here to hide this pipe. Very ingenuitive use of this stuff. Oh, and here, this beautiful onion relative with the purple flowers is one of the tastiest onions I've ever eaten. You can eat the flowers, they are delicious. An African date palm. This can grow in areas of the Mediterranean, but during the rainy season you lose all the fruits. That's why it's more a plant of the deserts. However, it needs a lot of water. The Bedouins say the date palm wants to grow with the feet in the water and with the head in the sun. No, with the head in the fire. That means it grows only, it produces only well in areas with fiery sun, but you better irrigate it really well. It grows only in oases, not in the real desert. And even if it looks like a desert, if there is a date palm, you probably dig deep enough, you find water. This num num actually has a couple edible fruits. Finally. Oh, this one is almost ripe. Not my favorite fruit, but good enough for sure. I guess this is Africa, because those things that look like cacti, they're actually spurges. You know how you recognize the spurge? By the toxic milky sap coming out of it. In some occasions you can eat a cactus, if you really know how to do it. You can never eat a spurge. That's why always know your cacti from your spurges. Look at that. The spurge will always have two spines growing together. Here they are really gigantic. Here they are smaller, but still very well visible. However, if you see something that looks like a cactus, always check. And if the spines growing two like this, don't ever try to forage this thing for any reason, except to poison something. You can use it for poisonous darts, to kill big animals, or you can use it to stun fish. As you see, you use it only when you need a strong poison, not when you need to eat something. Animals and fish, what's left? Birds. Pittosporum tobira has a very sticky substance around the seeds, and I think from it you can make a glue for catching small birds. Basically make a glue out of the fruits, you smear it on sticks, you hide somewhere, And when a bird gets glued to the sticks, you just collect it and go hide again. Here a beautiful cork oak. The cork hasn't been harvested for a very long time. So this oak will only grow on acidic rocks in the Mediterranean. The holm oak, those 3 stems behind it, will also grow on limestone. So let's look at the bark again. It's very important to know what kind of rock you are moving on. If you are foraging, and especially if you are looking for water. Look at that. This oak you will find everywhere in the Mediterranean. Actually, forests which are dominated by the holm oak, Quercus ilex, are the definition of the Mediterranean climate. Wherever you have Mediterranean climate, this plant will dominate the natural vegetation everywhere. If this thing does not dominate the natural vegetation or is absent, even when you are somewhere in the Mediterranean, even in southern Italy, there are places you are 5 kilometers away from the sea and this plant is missing, but they are beech forests or summer green oak forests. You might be able to see the Mediterranean beach, but you are still not in a Mediterranean climate if this thing is not dominating. So this you will find on acidic and on limestone rocks. Limestone rocks are the main rock in the Mediterranean. However, if you find this one, the oak with a really thick, soft bark, this is kind of a thin bark with small cracks and it's hard. You find this here, very thick bark, can be over 10 centimeters thick, with giant cracks, and it's soft. It feels like the cork of a wine bottle. Actually, you make the cork of a wine bottle from this tree. That's sour rocks. Very important, because if you find this, you can go uphill and still find water. You can find water in springs and valleys in the upper parts of the hills. If you have this here, you have to go downhill to find water. Even if you walk up 1,000 meters up the hills, it's possible that you will find no water at all. I almost lost the first tour group I've ever guided almost 30 years ago in the Bulgarian karst, because I was used to sandstone mountains, and all the springs in the upper part of the mountains had dried out because of the limestone. So very important. Look at the oaks, folks, and you will never be in lack of water. A tasty African fruit, the umcocola or K apple. Not a single fruit on this plant. It's also very strange. When it grows here in the Mediterranean, the fruits get really sweet. When it grows in more tropical areas, like I've eaten it on the Canary Islands, there it's very sour. If you can tell me why this thing needs to grow far away from the equator to be really sweet, I will be really obliged to you. It doesn't grow much further north than here because it needs at least Mediterranean climate to survive. If you come from Central Europe, you might like to walk among those reeds, or from Western Europe. There they are usually nice and smooth. However, here in the Mediterranean, they can be spiny as heck. This is not one of the spiniest species, but you walk through such reeds in the Mediterranean, you can come out with your blood gushing out from a dozen wounds. So be very careful. Yeah, you can always use the experience you have from other places. The experience you have from one place, you can use it in other places, but always be careful. Wow. Look at those pines. Always be careful. Not every experience you can transfer to a completely different or slightly different biogeographical zone. Be very careful of such nice looking reeds in the Mediterranean, folks. Very, very careful. Lots of brambles. This should be Rubus ulmifolius. They even have a couple edible fruits, but I'm too lazy to go there now. Look at this aloe. It has quite thin leaves. They cannot store so much water, so now they are making a pipe. They are basically shriveling up in order to prevent too much water loss. Although I'm wondering, aren't the stomata on the lower side? Shouldn't they do it the other way around? But look at those other aloes, which have much thicker leaves. They don't care so much. They can basically accumulate a lot more water, and they are a lot more relaxed than this year with its thin leaves. They can stay like this for many months, much longer than this year. This grows more in moister areas. In the Canary Islands I've seen it forming beautiful thickets. It's invasive, it's slightly invasive in the laurel forest biome, more or less in the rain or fog forest, but those things will probably not survive, and vice versa. This will not survive very well here without watering. Here we have some type of Sichuan pepper, some Toxylum. There are a lot of different species and I don't know which one this is. It has 5 leaflets and the winged petiole and nice bunches of little fruits. Those are relatives of the citruses. However, you don't eat the fruit but the rind. Very complicated flavor. Peppery, lemony, but the dominant flavor is one of machine oil. A nice little farmhouse-like thing. I guess the gardeners used to live in this little house while the big bosses lived in the big mansion. Taro. The leaves are edible as well as the tubers, but I'm more interested in the fig. Why no figs in other years? We are eating so much figs here, but now, nope, nothing. Oops, Peruvian apple cactus spotted. Don't really expect to find fruits there, but it would be a jackpot. I need to go and check this out. This, I guess, this is not really Mediterranean climate. This is the Sonora Desert. This is the desert which is adjacent to the Mediterranean areas in California, basically in the provinces of Sonora, in Mexico, and in the state of Arizona. There is the beautiful shindig agave. You fall into those things when you are somewhere far away from civilization. You're glad if you survive. They're growing here so nicely next to this staircase. Those things, they can very well kill you. The spines will most probably not kill you, but the shock and dehydration and exhaustion before you make it back to civilization might well kill you. Once we had to stop a trip in the Arizona desert because, well, it was more in the mountains, because somebody fell into one of those things. Blood everywhere. Barbary fig or prickly pear, the most common one in the Mediterranean. When my son was a little child, he always wanted the white ones, not the ripe ones. See those 4 up there? They're already ripe enough to eat and they are better than the fully ripe ones. But everything else, all the other ones here, are still too young. Stay away from them. Oh, there is some edible apple cactus here. Not the Peruvian one, not the one I wanted. Oh no, this is rotten. Still a pretty good one. Taste-wise, it doesn't compare to the Peruvian one, but it's still much better than nothing. Look at those agave spines on the stiff leaves. Working in an agave plantation in Latin America or other tropical and subtropical areas is a big punishment for most people. You are struggling with infected wounds most of the time. The fat thing could be a saguaro cactus, but this organ pipe here, I think this is a Peruvian apple cactus. Lots of young buds, but not a single fruit. There are fruits on the saguaro-like thing. See, right beneath this strap on the right side there is a fruit, but it's still unripe. But those here have the tastiest cactus fruits ever. However, you have to wait a couple months for them. Only prickly pears on the lower cactus. Here is another cactus which already has developed fruits. Oh yeah, actually those hairy fruits are not bad either. See the one that burst open? Come back. Oh no, now it's in the agave. Oh no. Ooh. Ooh. Gotcha. Without any big wounds. This is also quite a tasty one. Much tastier than the previous one. Much fruitier and much sweeter, but also very slimy. This overripe one, too many ants have already enjoyed it. Folks, the spiders here are vicious. This is spider silk, and it's really tough. You need a lot of strength to rip it apart. That's really tough spider silk. One of the toughest I've found outside of the tropics. Yeah, beautiful large botanic garden, but as I expected, bone dry. Here we have again the native palms, European dwarf palm. Here they are about a bit taller than me. They can get much taller, up to 6 meters, but not in this area. There is not enough rain here for them to get up to 6 meters. They have edible fruit, but they are not in season. Yuccas, you can eat the buds, you can eat the flowers and the fruits, but everything will be kind of either bitterish or full of oxalates. You can eat them, but don't really recommend it. If something is drying the Mediterranean faster than the pines, it's the eucalyptus. Look at the size of this thing. Almost 2 meters thick, growing very fast and sucking out every drop of water from the soil. Good for the timber industry, but very, very bad for the environment. The nursery looks very interesting, but it seems to be out of bounds. What a pity. Here the European dwarf palm with its big fruit bunches. They are not very tasty, but they are totally edible. Sometimes you even find tasty ones. Pity they have never been selected. You could have some sort of low quality dates for cold climate. Think it would be not too difficult to select an acceptable variety of this one. It will never compare to true dates, but who knows, maybe it get some success as cold climate dates. Carob or St. John's bread, the food of the prophets. Yeah, back then it was fancy to go to the desert, live off this thing for some time and get enlightenment from God. Those are not completely ripe. They already taste okay. A bit sweet and a bit tart. Not too good as far as St. John's bread goes. But, yeah, totally edible already. Yeah, but I'll wait for ripe ones, sweeter ones. This thing with those wavy leaves, I think it had some sort of edible fruits. Seems to be some sort of sumac. Cannot even place it in the correct geographical area. And with sumacs you have to be careful. There are such things as poison sumac. It is some type of sumac. Yeah. It's kind of, the fruits are kind of sweet. Botanic trail. I thought we had a botanic garden here. But okay, they have a special botanic trail. This looks American. This looks like Bromeliaceae. Like a lot of pineapple relatives. Chile d'altitude. Oh yeah, those are the high Chilean, well, deserts and semi-deserts, but the high mountain dry areas. Phew. This might look like nice and soft stuff, but walking through those pineapple relatives. They're also being planted as barbed wire, as a natural barbed wire. You'll arrive on the other side of this beautiful meadow without the skin on your legs. Did I mention that a lot of them have edible fruits? If I see something that's ripe and not completely shriveled up, I gotta gobble it down. No labels on this botanic trail. The botanic garden is really nice. I can even forgive the dryness. It's summer, it's the Mediterranean, it's normal. But the lack of labels is really tough. Yesterday I was in a botanic garden. Oh, look, meth. Nice. Oh, the meth is even fruiting. Oh, if the Breaking Bad guy could see me now. Well, yesterday I was in a botanic garden which was just some sort of slightly better city park, but it had hundreds of labels. Well, this year, not a single plant name. That's really disappointing. One day I'll make a video on this fruit. I will not only get demonetized, I'll also will not have to pay rent for a couple years to come. I don't know, what is publicly consuming meth in Europe worth? 5 years, 10 years? Service tree, tasty fruit which is native to the area, but still unripe. It will ripen towards the end of summer. Here next to it a loquat, a tasty non-native tree which ripened in spring. So no fruits from those two. Beautiful trails everywhere, but mostly native vegetation with all the non-native things usually kind of blending into it. You have to look for it. For example, this berberis here is not native. This stuff is not native. This pittosporum tree is not native. The eucalyptus is not native, but, well, the date palm is not native, at least not to this part of the Mediterranean. But you have to look closely to separate them from the native stuff. They come from similar geographical areas in the world, and also they have been planted around here for hundreds of years, so they really blend into the natural vegetation, despite a lot of them being horrible invasives. Look at the cotoneaster. It did flower, but now it's dropping most of the flowers. Hasn't got enough water to let the fruit survive. It needs all the water for the survival of the plant itself. Another nice and fancy mansion, and there should be an old orchard somewhere, but I missed this, and I also left my plan behind, my map of the place. What a pity. Haha. Monk's pepper. This is the opposite of Viagra, or the opposite of meth if you want. You take it, you get a really nicely balanced female hormone balance, no matter if you're a woman or a man. You can use it for pretty much all typical female troubles, but you can also use it for pretty much all typical male troubles. The woman will get her menstruation cramps and menopause stuff fixed, and the man will get its manliness taken away. Monk's pepper, because it was used to feed it to the monks in the monasteries in order to keep them from shenanigans. Pointe du figuier, the point of the fig tree. But is it also the point of the fig fruit? That's what I'm interested in. Ah well, it's still nice. Let's go down to the beach. No fig tree. I want my money back. But here you have again Antilles parbaiovis and another really thermo-Mediterranean species, the spurge, the tree spurge. I think it's Euphorbia arborea, which is basically dropping its leaves in winter, but it was so hot here that it dropped its leaves in summer. Both you will rarely see far away from the sea. The only place I've seen this thing far away from the sea was like 4 or 5 kilometers inland in Malta, and Malta is a completely subtropical, more or less frost-free place. Basically the only actually Malta and Monaco and the Vatican are the 3 European countries which are completely in the Mediterranean zone, but Malta is the only one of any size. And yeah, if you see those things, the tree spurge, Intentulus parbaiovis, it means that you're in a really frost-poor Mediterranean area. Also look at that, a feral date palm on the cliff over there, and another feral date palm here, and a lot of feral tourists, of course. And here you see the typical French tourist foraging in its natural habitat, harpooning every fish, squid or other edible or even moving target. Nah, I'm kidding, folks. I think those snorkelers at least were not harpooning anything, but most snorkelers I've seen around here have a harpoon, and believe me, they don't intend to pay for dinner. Desperately trying to forage for electricity since my battery is low, but despite having electricity in this building, it seems there is not a single plug in the publicly accessible area. At least there is water. Folks, when you're foraging, when you're foraging in a survival situation or in a real hunter-gatherer situation, water is 100 times more important than all the food you can forage, at least short term. A moist little valley, lots of ferns here, including huge tree ferns. Those need a lot of moisture, and they seem to be invasive. I guess they planted the couple big ones here. Maybe they spread. Well, here in the foreground the small ferns are bracken, but over there are some of the small ones which are not bracken. Funny how they water them enough for this. Well, not the bracken, the exotic tree ferns. Also a couple exotic palms, which might be good. And an avocado tree, not looking good. None of the palms is fruiting and they are not easily accessible. Not much stuff to forage. One good fig tree or fig shrub could change all the foraging success of the day. If you are looking at the last 2 days, I've spent a lot of energy and money driving around and walking around foraging. Barely foraged a couple calories. Pancha robusta, but here in the shade, the fruits still completely green. Bunya pine, yeah! I mean, it's not a real pine, but the cones are gigantic. One of them can feed me for a day or two. Don't see cones on the tree. Let's see. Looking for those scales, but this one is old. I need more fresh scales. Also something is foraging them. Something is pulling the big nuts out of the scales. Here, look at the size of this nut. And there is stuff inside. I can hear it. Can you hear it rattling? Blah. Completely moldy. That's why the squirrels left it alone. And pesky squirrels are very clever. Let's see. Here's another one. Pooh. Pooh, pooh. Hope this one is not just as moldy. Oh, at least the brown in our skin seems to be intact. No, inside the brown in our skin. You can see the grey mold. I want Bunya nuts. And this tree apparently does produce them. Come on. So many here. Are they all bad? Nobody has eaten them. They might all be bad. They might all be moldy. However, if I crack enough, maybe there will be one good one. Rock, hard place, go. Bah. Do you see how the spores of the mold are flying around? That's not healthy. Still wondering what this is. If you can ID this cactus, folks, please tell me. There are countless of those prickly pears, but this looks delicious. While I was checking out the beautiful and really extensive, also expensive, but I wanted to say extensive bookshop of the Botanic Garden, something crazy happened outside. I was hiding from the sun all the time, but now the surrounding hills are covered in mist. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but yeah, like plumes of mist are even flying through the garden. Now the question is this enough for the Canary Island pines to really earn their supper, to really pull their weight? Basically those are the conditions in which they shine. I guess that we will not have rain today, maybe tonight, but still, such heavy fog in midsummer at noon, when the sun should actually be able to disperse everything, is quite crazy. I can still see a couple 100 meters, but if I were a couple 100 meters away in the hills, probably I would be able to see just about 200 meters. It's really crazy. I didn't expect this. Look at this. This is the Point de Figuier where I was just half an hour ago. It's half covered in fog, and the little valley with the ferns is completely invisible behind the pines. Amazing. Crazy summer weather around here. I never expected this. So folks, here, this was the beautiful Mediterranean Botanic Garden here with some crazy un-Mediterranean climate. Really beautiful, but yeah, in summer it will be quite dry. The only thing they could really improve is putting hundreds or thousands of labels around here. Stay tuned for a lot more fruit videos from the beautiful and amazing gardens of the Côte d'Azur. And of course, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe.